Thank you. And just one more question. Atlas Roofing is 50 years old, and the extent of impact of government agencies on daily life today is enormously more significant than it was 50 years ago. I mean, should that be a concern for us or a consideration when we're trying to consider what power the government has to take away the jury trial right, or as an antecedent to that, to take away the right to go into court? I mean, your government is much more likely to affect you and proceed against you before one of its own agencies than in court. And that concern and that threat is far greater today than when Atlas Roofing was set up. And as a general matter, it does seem to me to be curious that, and unlike most constitutional rights, that you have that right until the government decides that they don't want you to have it. That doesn't seem to me the way the Constitution normally works.
Hey everybody, Todd Vandermeide back for another edition of Freedom Steel, former NRA contract lobbyist, Illinois gun law guru. And what you just heard there was an exchange between the Chief Justice, John Roberts, and the Solicitor General's office for the United States. And that ending sentence, and I quote, and as a general matter, it doesn't seem to me to be curious that and unlike most constitutional rights, that you have that right until the government decides that they don't want you to have it. That doesn't seem to me the way the Constitution normally works. So this was that case regarding the Securities and Exchange Commission that was up yesterday. And what I think is going on here is, one, I think they're telegraphing what they're going to do in the case coming up in January on the Chevron case. But here, they really focused in on what was going on with this concept of trial by jury, and the fact that, it wasn't a nominal fine. It was $300,000. The restitution was almost $700,000. And then there were prohibitions on that individual engaging in financial matters, being a consultant and advisor or anything like that. And so the CNN article I quoted yesterday dealt with a couple of quotes from the chief and Justice Gorsuch. Let's dive into those a little bit more, because one person that I didn't talk about yesterday was Justice Clarence Thomas. So let's roll the tape.
But you do agree, Mr. Fletcher, that it depends on the type of right involved?
We do. We take this court's statement of the public rights doctrine from Atlas Roofing and other cases, and the argument we're making here is limited to the particular strand of the public rights doctrine that the court has described in Atlas and other cases.
And how would you define public rights?
So I think the court has acknowledged most recently in oil states that the public rights concept is contested. The court has never fully plumbed its outer perimeters. I think what I'd say is the strand of the doctrine that's relevant here is the same one from Atlas, which is when the federal government, an agency, is enforcing a federal statute in its exercise of its sovereign powers, that's a matter involving public rights.
If I don't agree with you that we're talking about public rights here, that the private rights are involved, would you then think that it is required that it be adjudicated before an Article III court?
So here we go. The heart of the matter here is that the administrative state, the federal government, thinks that they can opt out of the Seventh Amendment to the Constitution if they set up a regulatory scheme and then decide that, okay, we're not going to attach some criminal penalties, but we're going to fine you and fine the bejesus out of you. And remember, in this case, this individual was fined $300,000 and ordered to pay almost $700,000 in restitution. And so we'll hear about that some more in the next clip that's coming up from Justice Gorsuch. But Thomas has already written on this, and he is not a big fan of this concept of public rights, where there's a regulatory agency that just bootstraps up some made out of whole cloth right to whatever. Essentially, it's just, well, it has to be fair. So there has to be some honesty in the stock market, in the securities, and in trades, and all that kind of stuff. I get it. There needs to be regulation on that. But this representative of the Solicitor General's office is arguing that if you create a bureaucracy and then decide that you're going to have these alternate means of adjudication because there aren't full criminal penalties necessarily attached. And mind you, it's at the discretion of the agency, not you. You don't get to opt and say, well, I'm choosing an alternative form of mediation and not going to court. It's, we're going to do it this way. And because of that, so Thomas isn't buying into this. And I think they said he's written on this subject previously. So either there's a dissent or some other papers out there where he talks about this notion. I'll have to go dig up what the justice has said about public rights, but he's not buying it. So the next exchange is with Justice Gorsuch. So let's roll that tape.
Well, we'd agree that the right to trial by jury, whether it's criminal or civil, is a very important foundational freedom in American society and a check on all branches of government, wouldn't we?
We do.
Okay. And we'd agree that if the government sought the same penalties in a criminal proceeding, a jury trial right would attach.
I think that depends, Justice Gorsuch. I think on fines, this is a point that Atlas made. Actually, their government can seek fines, and it doesn't trigger the Sixth Amendment jury trial
penalties,
right.
Penalties?
Criminal fines.
Criminal penalties, you think no jury trial right would attach? A felony, this is a felony fraud, and the guy can go to jail and he can get penalties. You think no jury?
I'm not saying that there's no limits on that. I'm just saying a point that the court made in Atlas was that for small fines, those
small
can go.
fines.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. But here we're not talking about a small fine.
Yeah. So, and again, I don't want to fight too much on this. I agree.
So
we'd agree required in a criminal case. Yes.
If this were a criminal case, it would have a jury, right?
I think that's I don't know honestly where the line would fall, but I'm not going to disagree that criminal cases involve juries, and if this were civilly brought in a court, it would require a jury. I concede that as well.
And well, let's come to that in a second. So, returning to the Chief Justice's questions about administrative regimes, I've got another one for you. Let's say the government revived the Sedition Act and decided that, it's really important to have a federal agency who could bring penalties for defamation against the government. Jury trial? No jury trial?
Unconstitutional on First Amendment grounds.
Forget about the First Amendment. Too easy. We're talking about the Seventh Amendment and the right to a jury trial, and that is an important and ancient right, too.
Yeah. And what I'm saying, and the reason I responded to that, I realize that's not the point of the question, but I think the intuitive force...
Then let's answer the question.
Yeah, so if it's a
Seventh Amendment right or no Seventh Amendment?
Otherwise valid federal regulatory statute being enforced by the government pursuant to its sovereign powers, that's Atlas Roofing in this case. Lots of other constitutional problems.
No jury trial right. I think that has to be the implication of your argument.
And right there, Justice Gorsuch got them. They want to determine the playing field. If they want to control something, they want to keep it out of the courts. I mean, for all of Trump's problems, he reshaped a good chunk of the courts with the judicial picks. I mean, that's one thing Mitch McConnell got right by keeping Merrick Garland off the Supreme Court. But here, the government wants to control the venue and the playing field and move in a way that they don't have to go to court and afford you a jury trial or something other than an administrative law judge. And here, I think Justice Gorsuch absolutely nails him down, and he's not having any part of it. But I think it gets a little better.
I want to talk to you for just a minute about how you deal with Tull and Grand Financiera. We agree that Tull found that some civil penalties under the Clean Water Act imposed by the government do trigger the Seventh Amendment, right?
When heard in court.
When heard in court. And that's the key distinction as far as you're concerned. What if the government tomorrow decided, well, we don't like those jury trial that come with that. We're going to effectively overrule toll by moving those to administrative proceedings. Then the Seventh Amendment would disappear on your account, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Bingo. He just nailed them. He just got the government to admit that they want to work around the Seventh Amendment's right to a jury trial. And you know why? Part of it is because we're going to play Todd's math of the courts. If the Seventh Amendment is implicated, then naturally you have the Fifth Amendment right, you have the Sixth Amendment right. Those two get implicated as well. And it's a stacking, and now they have to contend with all of those things. So let's see what else he finishes up here with.
In admiralty or equity
I
proceedings.
understand that. I think
and this is just that.
The key part of the answer is yes, that would overrule the pre-existing Seventh Amendment right this court recognized in toll.
I disagree that it would overrule that right, respectfully, Justice Gorsuch. I think
It
the
would
right in toll...
evaporate it?
No,
It would dissipate it? What verb would you prefer?
No, the Seventh Amendment right that the court recognized in Tull is the one in the Seventh Amendment, which is a right in suits at common law.
Okay.
If it's an administrative proceeding, it's not a suit at common law.
Okay, so let's talk about Grand Financiera, which applied Toll's test in a non-Article III tribunal, right?
Yes.
Okay, and it said the Seventh Amendment applied there in a non-Article III tribunal.
Yes.
Okay. I understand that your distinction there is that it happened to be between two private parties.
Not just our distinction, the court's distinction in Grand Financiera.
No, but between your argument between this case and that case is that's the distinction, the relevant distinction is private parties, right?
Which was core to Grand Financiera's reasoning, is all I'm saying.
Fine. But now let's say that the government brought a fraudulent conveyance argument instead of a private party. Then the Seventh Amendment right would again, on your account, I think, dissipate, disappear, whatever verb you want to use.
So I'm not as sure about that, Justice Gorsuch. I think the principle in Atlas Roofing, and the one we're relying on here, is government enforcement in its sovereign capacity. If you're talking about government in its proprietary capacity, bringing a fraudulent conveyance claim as an ordinary participant in
No,
bankruptcy.
it creates some statute much like the one we have here that looks a lot like fraud, but a little bit different in sovereign capacity.
Yeah, so there are a lot of statutes that say that in those circumstances, the government can proceed in administrative proceedings without a jury trial right. Yes.
Thank you.
So right then and there, he got him. The government wants to set up alternative measures to adjudicate things. You know, if the government sets up its own process for something it's going to do, then, you know, what does that implicate? Well, how about FOID card? How about the whole appellate process with the FOID review board, the CCL review board, that it's all an internal process. Look at the clear and present danger stuff that a police department, a school official, somebody can sit there and file a clear and present danger report, and it all goes through an administrative process where you may not have a right to counsel, a right to a hearing. It's all done like a Star Chamber-esque climate, and then you may not even get to confront witnesses, but they're going to be able to remove a fundamental right. What if there was a national red flag law? The government here is claiming that they could just strip you of your rights and get around to giving you due process on the backside of things. Nope. I think that Justice Gorsuch correctly pinned it. I think he's got their number on this, and he's not buying any of what they are selling. But let's see what else we've got here.
The nature of the action, whether the action is a private right or a public right. How can that be?
So I think the answer to that is that the Seventh Amendment depends on the forum. That's the text and tradition of the Seventh Amendment. It's suits at common law, so it never applied in equity. We also don't think it applies in administrative proceedings. But there's an important check on when Congress can assign matters to administrative proceedings, and that's the public rights, private rights distinction. That comes from Article 3.
So now we're getting down to splitting more hairs. What we've got is, well, if it's not an Article 3 court, okay, if it's not in a regular court, but then they try to go on, and there is this public right, private right distinction. Earlier, he said that it was two private parties where the government wasn't involved, but he said the government's free to do this in administrative proceedings, a la the FOID card. But if you want to talk about how they're going to argue, they're going to talk about the public right, and that's going to get to the Gun Control Act where they license FFLs. What if this zero tolerance thing that Joe Biden was putting out there with the ATF and these revocations and all that kind of stuff, and now they can't take you because under Ezell, thank you, Rhonda, there is the right to acquire. The right to acquire a firearm comes with the inherent right to sell a firearm, either in a private transaction or a commercial transaction, because you have to acquire it either by private sale, commercial sale, or making it. That's it. So here, they would love to sit there and define as much stuff as they can under administrative process and then turn around and shove you through that grinder instead of having to actually prove a case in court beyond a reasonable doubt or whatever higher standard we might be able to obtain. But this is Amy Coney Barrett, and let's pick up where she left off.
But it seems to me that what Atlas Roofing is saying here is that the public rights, private rights, just this part of it, because it seems to me that part of your argument depends on reading Atlas Roofing for all of it, all that it's worth. And I agree, Atlas Roofing is a good case for you. But it seems to me that that part that I read and part of the premise of Atlas Roofing really doesn't depend on the private rights, public rights. It really kind of depends on the forum. And it's obviously true, right, that if you're in front of an agency, you're not entitled to a jury trial. So that's the whole question. So it seems to me if you have an entitlement to a jury, if you're in federal court, I don't understand then how you not have that right, how it can go to an agency.
And Justice Barrett just nailed it. How is it that you have less rights in an administrative proceeding than what the Constitution affords you? She just pinned their ears back with that very simple question and statement, because what are the FOID card administrative proceedings? What are the CCL administrative proceedings? What are the initial red flag things to where they're done ex parte? What about all this licensure revoking for, say, either Illinois' gun dealer license or whether or not there's a federal firearms license that is state through an ATF revocation procedure? How is it you are afforded less rights? Hey, this video is starting to run long. There's much more to dissect here, so I'll probably cut this up into a second one here. If you've been noticed, I've been skewing to one side or the other. My back is still messed up, trying to make the most of it. But as always, we really appreciate your support. We like the video down below, subscribe, copy and paste, and ship this out to all your friends on social media. And we'll be back with another part. And as always, frag out.